What if the biggest economic revolution isn't about new factories, but new minds? Or even like, what if you could literally rent out your brain for a few hours a day? For biocomputing, sounds like science fiction, right? But the underlying tech is already sparking some really deep questions about our future. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the profound impact of artificial intelligence. And it's not just another new technology, it's what they call a general purpose technology, a GPT. Think steam engine, electricity, the internet, that level.
Exactly. And that GPT designation, well, it means the implications are just
Huge.
huge. AI is really poised to fundamentally reconfigure economies, societies. It forces us to ask some incredibly challenging but also, fascinating questions about work, about wealth, even the nature of our social contract.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're deep diving into a pretty comprehensive report. It's titled AI, Economy, and Human Brain. Our mission today is to kind of cut through the noise, pull out the most crucial insights, and help you navigate these complex forecasts. We want to understand the future of work, explore how wealth might get distributed, rethink that social contract, and yeah, even touch on that speculative frontier of direct biointegration. But what's really critical to remember, I think, is that the future isn't some predetermined path written in code. It's going to be forged by the choices we make in boardrooms, in policy, how society adapts, our ethical debates, all of it.
Right. Let's start with what feels like a paradox, the AI productivity paradox. You see these economic projections for AI's impact on GDP, on productivity, and they vary wildly. I mean, how can estimates differ by an order of magnitude? From like a 1% boost to a massive 15% increase. What's going on there?
Yeah, you've hit on the core puzzle. So at the, let's say, conservative end, you've got Daron Acemoglu at MIT, very respected voice. He sees AI's initial impact as non-trivial but modest. His prediction for the next decade, about a 1.1% boost to U.S. GDP, maybe 0.7% total productivity increase. And the really interesting insight is why. He argues that even if lots of tasks are exposed to AI, only about 5% might be profitably automated in the near term because the implementation costs, the adjustment costs, they're really high. So for him, right now, AI is more of a ripple, definitely not a tsunami. Not yet, anyway.
Okay, a ripple. And then there's the middle ground. Institutions like the IMF, the Dallas Fed.
Right. The IMF is forecasting maybe a 0.5% annual global GDP boost between 2025 and 2030. The Dallas Fed suggests AI could add about 0.3 percentage points to annual productivity growth for a decade.
So significant you'd notice it, but yeah, not earth-shattering, as the source puts it.
Exactly. But then you contrast that with the really optimistic outlooks from the big consulting firms, the banks.
Yeah.
This is where it gets wild. BWC projects up to a 15% boost to global economic output by 2035.
15%.
Yeah. Goldman Sachs predicts a $7 trillion increase. That's 7% in global GDP over a decade, plus a 1.5 percentage point boost to annual labor productivity. McKinsey's numbers are even bigger, suggesting AI could generate somewhere between $17.1 trillion and $25.6 trillion annually in economic value.
Yeah.
And JP Morgan, they're forecasting a 17.5% cumulative productivity upside over 20 years. They see AI as more transformative than PCs or the internet.
That's just an incredible range, from ripple to tsunami, basically. But I'm still trying to grasp what's the fundamental difference in thinking there. Is it just AI doing the old jobs faster, or is it actually unlocking something totally new, like new gold mines?
That's precisely the core divergence.
Yeah.
Acemoglu, the conservative view, mostly sees AI as that better shovel. You mentioned automating existing tasks, making things more efficient. But the real game changer, the new gold mines view, that's where AI isn't just about efficiency. It's about innovation. It's about discovery. Think about it for decades. Research has shown that finding truly new ideas has actually been getting harder and harder.
Right. Ideas are getting harder to find.
Exactly. AI could potentially break that trend by, turbocharging research, finding new drugs, generating novel antibodies, things like that, at a speed we just couldn't imagine before. That ability, the acceleration of discovery, is what underpins those really huge optimistic forecasts.
Okay, so that makes sense. But even with all this massive investment pouring into AI, I mean, semiconductor revenue up 50% since early 2023, that's huge. We haven't seen those big productivity boosts show up in the economy yet. Why the lag? Are we just like throwing money at it without getting results back?
That's a great question, and it points to something really important. It's actually a classic pattern. They call it the J-curve. It's typical of any general-purpose technology. We saw it with electricity. It took something like 32 years for that to really show up in the productivity data.
32 years, wow.
Yeah, and the personal computer, about 15 years. The thing is, the gains aren't realized just by buying the fancy new tech. They require really costly, difficult organizational redesign. Businesses have to fundamentally change how they operate to actually leverage it. McKinsey found, as of 2025, only about 21% of organizations using generative AI have actually redesigned their workflows in a fundamental way.
Only 21%.
Right. So Goldman Sachs, for example, they don't expect AI to have a really measurable impact on U.S. GDP until maybe 2027. We're still in that initial dip of the J-curve. Investment is high, yeah, but the big system-wide changes needed to capture the productivity boost, those are still unfolding.
That J-curve idea really clicks. So it's less about the tech arriving and more about how deeply we embed it, how we reconfigure everything around it. And that takes serious commitment and, well, time.
Absolutely. It's a massive undertaking for any organization.
Yeah.
And that actually leads to another crucial point in the report, the economic payoff. It isn't guaranteed just by the tech working well. In fact, these non-technical factors, they're critical.
Like what?
Well, trust and governance are huge.
Mm-hmm.
PwC did this scenario analysis. It's really interesting. Pessimistic scenario. Low trust. Minimal cooperation between countries or companies. That yields maybe only 1% growth from AI.
Okay.
But optimistic scenario. High trust, responsible governance, collaboration. That could potentially unlock the full 15% they projected. It totally reframes AI ethics, right? It's not just a nice to have, it's actually a core economic driver.
Huh. Ethics is an economic driver. I like that.
And of course, we can't ignore the downsides, the negative externalities, like the massive energy needed for data centers or addictive algorithms or new kinds of security threats. All those have to be managed, mitigated for the net economic benefit to really materialize fully.
Okay, moving from the big economic picture to people's jobs. It's easy to picture the, robot apocalypse taking over everything, but the report suggests it's not mass unemployment, but profound transformation. But if AI is automating so many tasks, isn't that just kicking the can down the road? How does this transformation actually play out for the average person?
It's a fair question. But the data, well, it paints a more nuanced picture.
Yeah.
The World Economic Forum's 2025 report, for instance, suggests AI and automation could actually create 170 million new jobs by 2030.
Create jobs.
Yeah, while displacing about 92 million. So that's a net creation of 78 million jobs.
Okay, so not mass unemployment.
Not necessarily. The key insight isn't the number of jobs, it's the massive job churn. This churn affects over 260 million roles globally. Think about that.
Right.
McKinsey projects that in Europe and the U.S. alone, we could see up to 12 million occupational transitions by 2030.
12 million people changing jobs.
Or significantly changing within their jobs. And that rate is double what it was before the pandemic. So it's less about robots taking all the jobs and more like we all need to get really good at playing musical chairs with our careers. The real challenge is adaptability. Can we adapt fast enough? It's not about a fundamental scarcity of work itself, at least not according to these forecasts.
Okay, so the focus shifts. It's not about jobs vanishing wholesale, but about AI automating specific tasks within jobs, which leads to more human-machine collaboration. The WEF says, 30% of work tasks already involve that collaboration as of 2025?
Exactly, and this is where it gets really interesting strategically for businesses. They basically face a choice. Do they adopt a replacement model? Use AI mainly for cost-cutting, reducing headcount? We've seen some companies, like Klarna was mentioned, move that way.
Right.
Or do they choose an augmentation model, where AI enhances what humans can do, frees people up for more complex, creative, strategic work, which could potentially allow for higher wages per employee, actually. PwC suggests firms using AI for growth, not just efficiency, tend to see better results overall.
So it creates this kind of kaleidoscope effect. Job descriptions changing, mutating, new roles popping up we haven't even thought of yet.
Precisely. Think of a financial analyst who used to spend ages reconciling data. Now AI does that, so they shift to higher-level strategic advisory. Or a doctor using an AI diagnostic tool to spot rare diseases faster, freeing them up for more patient interaction or complex cases.
This whole reconfiguration, it obviously creates what the report calls a great skills revaluation. So for you listening out there, what skills are, winning? And which ones are losing value in this new landscape?
Well, on the decline side, it's probably not too surprising. Routine cognitive tasks. Think data entry, basic admin support, some levels of customer service, basic accounting functions. McKinsey projects something like a 14% decline in demand for those basic cognitive skills by 2030.
14% drop. Ouch.
Yeah. And routine manual tasks are also decreasing, though maybe at a slower pace, depending on the task. But on the ascending side, the skills in demand. It's sort of a dual trend. First, obviously, advanced tech skills are surging. The WEF points to AI and big data specialists, fintech engineers, cybersecurity experts, fastest growing roles, and PwC's AI jobs barometer for 2025. It showed U.S. workers with advanced AI skills, machine learning, prompt engineering, that sort of thing, commanded a 56% wage premium in 2024.
56%. That doubled from the year before.
Doubled from 25% the previous year. It's a massive premium for AI literacy right now.
Okay, so tech skills, obviously, but you said a dual trend. What's the other side?
This is the really interesting, maybe paradoxical part. Uniquely human skills are also rising in value. OECD research shows increased demand for things like management skills, social and emotional skills, and especially originality.
Originality, like creativity.
Exactly. Creativity, developing new ideas, strategic thinking. The WEF also emphasizes analytical thinking, creative thinking, resilience, leadership, social influence. So, success in the future likely demands this hybrid skill set. You need the tech literacy, absolutely, but you also need those deeply human abilities that AI just can't replicate: empathy, complex problem solving in novel situations, strategic vision.
A hybrid. Okay. So what does this mean for us then? For the individual trying to navigate this future? Is it just constant retraining forever?
Well, a massive society-wide investment in education and training seems pretty imperative, yeah.
Yeah.
Something like 85% of employers are already planning to prioritize upskilling their current workforce.
Yeah.
They see the need. And the report highlights two main ways AI augmentation seems to be playing out. There's leveling up, where AI helps lower-skilled workers perform more complex tasks, like AI coding assistants giving the biggest productivity boost to junior developers, letting them punch above their weight.
Okay, leveling the playing field a bit.
Potentially. And then there's supercharging, where AI makes already high-skilled experts even more productive, enhances their capabilities.
Yeah.
The big societal question is, which of these gets more focus, more investment? If we focus on leveling up, it could broaden prosperity. If it's mainly supercharging the elite, it could worsen inequality. It really requires collaboration, governments, businesses, labor to guide this transition effectively, make sure the benefits are shared broadly.
Right. Which brings us squarely to the inequality question. As these AI-driven productivity gains start rolling in, who actually benefits? The tech itself might be neutral, but how we integrate it, well, it could have wildly different effects on inequality. The report lays out two scenarios, almost polar opposites. AI as a great stratifier, making things worse, or maybe even a great equalizer. How does that work?
Yeah, the case for widening inequality is frankly pretty straightforward. AI is a powerful form of capital, right? And it can substitute for human labor. So the gains from this new capital naturally tend to flow to its owners.
Capital versus labor.
Exactly. Widening the gap between income from capital profits, dividends, and income from labor, from wages. Economists like Thomas Piketty have highlighted this trend for a while, and it's amplified by these superstar dynamics, the development, the control of the most powerful AI models. It's concentrated in just a handful of huge corporations and research hubs.
Like Silicon Valley.
Precisely, leading to very concentrated economic returns, huge geographical disparities, and globally, high-income countries are just much better positioned. The U.S. pulled in, $67 billion in private AI investment in 2023? That's nearly 9 times China's figure. This could even let advanced economies reshore manufacturing, pulling jobs back from developing nations by automating them, undermining the whole low-cost labor advantage.
Okay, it's pretty easy to see how that path leads to more inequality both within and between countries. But you mentioned this counter-argument, the great equalizer idea, that AI could actually narrow inequality. How on earth could that happen? It seems totally counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? And that's what makes it so intriguing. Think about past tech waves, like computerization in the 80s and 90s, that mostly automated routine manual tasks, often hitting less educated workers harder, widening wage gaps.
Right.
But AI is different. It can perform non-routine cognitive tasks that used to be the exclusive domain of high-skill, highly paid professionals. Writing code, drafting legal documents, analyzing complex reports. AI can augment or even automate parts of those jobs.
So it affects the higher earners more directly.
Potentially, yes.
Mm-hmm.
By automating or augmenting these high-end tasks, AI could actually increase the supply of cognitive output, maybe putting downward pressure on the wages of some of the highest-paid workers. There's research suggesting AI capital can actually decrease the traditional skill premium enjoyed by top earners.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, remember that leveling up effect. AI could boost the productivity of lower-skilled workers.
Yeah.
Let them do higher-value tasks, potentially helping rebuild the middle class.
Wow, so it's like squeezing from the top and boosting from the bottom, potentially.
That's the optimistic equalizer scenario, yes. A real possibility, though far from guaranteed.
So it's this complex battle of opposing forces. What actually determines the outcome? Stratification or equalization? What are the key factors?
The report points to two really decisive factors. First is complementarity. The IMF looks at this closely. Does AI primarily substitute for high-skilled workers? Does it replace what they do, pushing their wages down? Or does it complement their work? Does it act like a powerful assistant, making them more productive, more valuable, potentially increasing their earnings? The balance there is crucial.
Okay, substitution versus complementarity. And the second factor?
This one might be even more fundamental. Capital ownership.
Who owns the robots, basically?
Yeah. Essentially, yes. Who owns the AI systems, the data, the platforms? Because even if wage gaps between workers narrow, say, the gap between a junior analyst and a senior partner shrinks, the overall share of national income going to capital rather than labor is still likely to increase significantly. And who owns capital? Disproportionately, it's high-income individuals. They own the AI company stocks, the venture capital funds. So that mid-level analyst salary might go up a bit thanks to AI tools, but the owners of the firm, they could capture exponential gains from the collective productivity boost. This means overall wealth inequality could explode, even if wage inequality happens to narrow a bit. The fundamental question becomes, who owns the new means of production?
Okay, these are huge potential shifts. Labor changing, capital gaining power. It seems pretty clear our traditional social safety nets, built for a world of stable, full-time jobs, might just be inadequate. What new models are people proposing? How do we handle resource distribution in this kind of future?
Yeah, the inadequacy of current systems is a major theme. The most prominent proposal, the one everyone talks about, is Universal Basic Income, UBI.
Right, regular cash payments to everyone, no strings attached.
Exactly. The arguments for it usually center on reducing poverty, improving health and education outcomes, providing a stable floor in a turbulent job market. The criticisms, usually about the cost, potentially prohibitive, and the worry it might disincentivize work, make people lazy.
That's the classic pushback, yeah, the work incentive.
But what's really fascinating here, and the report digs into this, is how much the empirical evidence from actual UBI pilots is starting to refute some of those biggest concerns.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, first, spending. Overwhelmingly, recipients use the money for basic necessities, food, housing, transport, not blowing it on frivolous things, alcohol or drugs. Pilots from LA to Kenya show this consistently.
Okay, so they're responsible with it. What about the work question? Do people stop working?
Not in large numbers, no. The early experiments, like Mincome in Canada back in the 70s, showed only moderate reductions in work hours, mostly from new mothers staying home longer with infants or teenagers staying in school longer to finish their education.
So investing in human capital, essentially.
Exactly. More recent studies, like the Open Research meta-analysis, found only a very small reduction, maybe 1.3 hours per week on average. And that was driven by young people pursuing education or parents finding better, more flexible jobs that fit their lives better. It seems to foster human capital investment and better job matching, not idleness.
That flips the narrative a bit.
It really does.
No.
Plus, there are consistent positive impacts on health and well-being, reduce stress, better food security, improve child outcomes. And it can even foster entrepreneurship. GiveDirectly's pilot in Kenya saw recipients investing in small businesses. Open Research found certain groups, like Black participants and women who received higher payments, were actually more likely to start a business.
So it provides capital and security to take a risk.
Precisely. And the design really matters too. A longer-term UBI encourages more savings and risk-taking than a short one. A lump sum might spur more immediate business creation than monthly payments. Stability and predictability seem key.
That's a much more positive picture of UBI than you often hear. But what about going deeper, beyond just income support? Are there ideas about redistributing actual economic power, the capital itself?
Absolutely. That's where concepts like Universal Basic Assets, UBA, and Universal Basic Capital, UBC, come into play. UBA, an idea from the Institute for the Future, argues for universal access to core resources, not just cash, but things like secure housing, financial security, quality healthcare, lifelong education, and importantly, open digital assets, like open source knowledge, open AI tools.
So access to the building blocks of a good life in the modern economy.
Right. And UBC, sometimes called a Citizens Endowment or a Beatty Bond, goes a step further. It's typically envisioned as a one-time capital grant given to young adults, maybe when they turn 18 or 21. The explicit goal is to counteract inherited wealth inequality, give everyone a starting springboard for investment in education, starting a business, buying a home. And studies do show that owning even modest financial assets early in life leads to significantly better long-term outcomes.
Okay, so UBI for income, UBA for assets, UBC for starting capital. What about sharing in the actual profits of this AI-driven economy, especially if capital's share is growing?
That leads us to social wealth funds, or SWFs. These are basically collectively owned investment funds. They hold assets, stocks, bonds, real estate on behalf of all citizens. The return generated by the fund can then be used to finance public services or may be distributed directly to citizens as a universal dividend.
Like the Alaska Permanent Fund with oil money.
Exactly like that. That's the best known example. But you could capitalize such a fund in various ways in an AI economy, maybe through levies on corporate shares or specific wealth taxes, or even by leasing publicly owned digital assets or data. It fundamentally transforms the public from just workers or consumers into collective owners of the increasingly automated economy.
That's a powerful idea, collective ownership. What about using plain old tax policy? There's always talk about a robot tax. Is that a viable solution?
The robot tax idea, while appealing intuitively to some, faces some big practical hurdles. Like, how do you even define a robot for tax purposes? In the age of software automation and AI, it gets tricky fast.
Yeah, I can see that.
And there's concern it could just stifle innovation, discourage beneficial automation. South Korea actually tried something more nuanced. They reduced tax incentives for automation, rather than imposing a whole new tax.
Subtle difference.
A more robust strategy, arguably, is broader tax reform, shifting the overall tax base away from labor and towards capital. So maybe reducing payroll taxes that burden workers and employers while increasing taxes on things like capital gains, corporate profits, or maybe even wealth itself. This aligns the tax code better with an economy where capital, especially AI-driven capital, generates more of the value. It captures those productivity gains at the source for public benefit.
Okay, lots of policy levers to potentially pull there. Now, let's loop back and connect all this to that really provocative listener question from the start. Could people rent their brain out for a few hours a day for biocomputing? It still sounds like pure sci-fi, but you mentioned the underlying tech and the ethical questions are already being explored. How so?
Right. So to even approach that idea, you really need two key technological pillars. First, brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, systems that can read neural signals from the brain, or maybe even write information to the brain.
Reading and writing to the brain.
Potentially. And second, you need the concept of biocomputing itself. That could mean using the human brain's own incredible neural architecture for computation, basically harnessing our thinking process directly. Or, perhaps more likely in the near term, using external devices built with living biological materials, like cultured neurons, to perform computations.
Okay, so BCIs first. What can they actually do today? Are we talking real mind reading, controlling things with thoughts?
We are definitely talking about controlling things with thoughts, yes. We have invasive BCIs. These require surgery, implanting electrodes directly into or onto the brain. Companies like Neuralink, BlackRock Neurotech, Synchron, they're doing this. And the results in clinical trials are frankly remarkable. For patients with severe paralysis, spinal cord injuries, ALS, they're enabling them to control computer cursors, browse the web, play simple games, even operate robotic limbs just by thinking.
That's incredible. Life-changing for those patients.
Absolutely. Neuralink is even pursuing a project called Blindsight, aiming to restore vision. But because they're invasive, the risks are significant. So right now, they're limited to people with severe medical needs.
Makes sense. What about non-invasive options, things you wear?
Yeah, those exist too. Think headsets using EEG electroencephalography to read brainwaves from the scalp. Companies like Emotive, OpenBCI. They're safe, accessible, used in research for wellness apps, meditation, focus training, or controlling very simple devices. The limitation there is the signal is much noisier, lower resolution. It's harder to get fine-grained control or information.
So we're not at the neural lace stage from science fiction yet.
No, not even close. That's still very much theoretical, a sort of holy grail for the field.
Okay. Now, this biocomputing part, you said using living neurons. What's the closest thing we have now to that idea of renting out brain power, even if it's not our brain?
This is where it gets really wild and surprisingly close to the listener's query in a way. The field is called organoid intelligence, or OII.
Organoid intelligence, like mini brains in a dish.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Scientists can now take human stem cells, often from skin samples, and coax them in the lab to grow into these tiny three-dimensional structures that resemble early-stage human brain development. They're called brain organoids.
Wow.
They're not conscious, they're not full brains, but they self-organize into rudimentary neural networks. They form synapses, they show electrical activity, and when scientists integrate these organoids with microelectrode arrays, they become functional biological computing units, rudimentary ones, but functional.
So they can compete.
Yes. They leverage the brain's incredible strengths, massive parallelism, and unbelievable energy efficiency. Remember, the human brain performs calculations potentially faster than the world's biggest supercomputers, but runs on just 20 watts of power like a dim light bulb.
That efficiency is mind-boggling.
It is. And these intelligence-in-a-dish systems, they're already learning. They've been taught to play the video game Pong. They've shown basic speech recognition capabilities. They can control simple robots.
They taught a brain organoid to play Pong.
They did. And here's the really startling part, connecting back to the listener. This is already becoming a commercial field. A Swiss startup called FinalSpark and an Australian one called Cortical Labs are actually offering remote access to their biological computing platforms via the cloud. FinalSpark, for instance, literally rents out access to systems using 4 interconnected brain organoids for as little as $1,000 a month.
You can rent time on lab-grown brain organoids online right now.
You can. That is the closest existing analog today to renting brain power. It's not your brain, but it's biological intelligence being leased for computation.
That's astonishing. Okay. So what does this all mean for us? This frontier, BCIs, organoid intelligence, it feels like it opens up a huge ethical Pandora's box. We're moving beyond just an information economy, aren't we?
I think so. That metaphor of renting brain power, it points towards the potential commodification of cognition itself. We went from the attention economy, paying with our eyeballs, to the data economy, paying with our clicks and personal info. Are we heading toward the cognitive economy, where our neural patterns, maybe even aspects of our thought processes, become tradable? The immediate risks, the ones we need to grapple with right now, are maybe more mundane than sci-fi dystopias, but they're incredibly profound.
Like what? What are the main concerns today?
First and foremost, mental privacy. BCIs, even non-invasive ones, collect neural data. That is arguably the most sensitive personal information imaginable. Even if it's not perfect thought reading, it allows for inferences about your emotional state, your intentions, your cognitive function, your health conditions.
And companies might sell this data.
Absolutely. Alarmingly, the user agreements for many consumer neurotech devices already grant companies extensive rights to analyze, share, and sell your neural data to third parties. Your brain activity could become just another data set to be monetized.
That's deeply unsettling. What else?
Second, autonomy and identity. If BCIs can eventually not just read, but also write information to the brain, or merge our cognition more directly with AI, it raises fundamental questions about free will, about personal identity, authenticity. Could these systems subtly manipulate our desires? Could they alter our sense of self without us even realizing it? Where does your end and the machine begin?
Right. Existential questions, really.
And third, the familiar problem of bias and discrimination, but applied to the brain. Like all AI, BCI systems learn from data, and they can embed societal biases. Imagine an employer using BCI to monitor employee focus. Could a poorly designed algorithm unfairly penalize someone who is neurodivergent, whose brain works differently? Or could insurance companies use neural data for risk assessments, leading to biased premiums based on inferred health or cognitive traits?
These are fundamental concerns. It really sounds like we need a new set of rules, a new framework for protecting our minds in this era. Is anything being done?
Yes, absolutely. There is a growing global movement to establish new human rights, specifically for the brain, often called neuro rights. The 5 core rights usually proposed are: 1. The right to personal identity protection against alterations to your sense of self. 2. The right to free will protection against covert manipulation of your decisions. 3. The right to mental privacy, keeping your neural data confidential. 4. The right to equal access, ensuring fair access to beneficial neurotechnologies, preventing a cognitive divide. And 5. The right to protection from bias, guarding against algorithmic discrimination based on brain data.
Neuro rights. Is this actually happening in law anywhere?
It is. Chile, remarkably, became the first country in the world to amend its constitution to explicitly protect mental integrity and brain activity from manipulation by neurotechnologies. Other countries and international bodies are debating similar measures. The ethical and legal groundwork is being laid now, and it has to be, because as we've seen, these technologies aren't just theoretical anymore. They're here, and they're advancing incredibly fast.
Wow. Okay. So wrapping this all up, AI is clearly a pivotal moment, huge opportunities, but also these incredibly profound challenges that touch everything from our jobs to our very sense of self. And the future, as you said, isn't set in stone. It really depends on the choices we make now.
That's exactly right. If we look back at our deep dive today, the key takeaways seem clear. We need to consciously foster innovation that augments humans, not just replaces them for cost savings. We need massive investment in human capital and lifelong learning and adaptability. We absolutely have to design new, fair mechanisms for distributing the wealth generated by AI, whether it's UBI, SWS, or tax reforms. And critically, we need to build that robust ethical and legal scaffolding like neurorights for these incredibly powerful technologies that are going to reshape our lives.
We've seen how AI can change our jobs, our wealth, maybe even, what it means to be human in an economic sense. As AI continues to blur these lines between mind and machine, maybe the deepest dive we all need to take is into ourselves, into our values. So thinking about everything we've discussed, what stands out most to you listening? How do you think these profound shifts might redefine not just our economy, but our shared humanity in the coming decades? The opportunity to actively architect a more productive, more equitable, more human-centered future, it feels unparalleled. But doing nothing, being passive in this moment, that feels like the biggest risk of all.